Today's session is really about the modern CISO, and that suggests there's been a change and that the CISO role and the CISO position within an organization has changed, and that we have to meet modern threats differently. Thomas, I'd really like you to join me, and John, I'd really like you to join me here today. And really, I want to start this out with asking a fairly simple question. The overview of today's session mentions the recent spate of supply chain attacks. That's the Sunburst attack last year. That's the Microsoft attacks more recently. And clearly this has had an impact on the way we assess vendor risk and the way that we are measuring that level of risk. But I want to ask a little bit more basic question. I want to understand how this has impacted the way we trust and maybe what that means, trusting vendors, trusting technology, trusting people. Is it time for us to look at trust differently? Thomas, could you answer that for me first?
Well, thinking out loud, I think there is not a fundamental change on how we look at trust, but there's a slight shift. We cannot implicitly trust our vendors anymore that they do everything right. We would love to do that, but we have to assume there are flaws. We have to ascertain the implication of a failure in a single vendor or multiple ones. But look at SolarWinds. This was something nobody expected actually, but it had a serious impact. So for each significant technology and vendor we built, we will have to put a fail-safe protocol in place to see what if that gets hacked or compromised or whatever, what are the implications, right? And it drives along a little bit the conversations we had in the past about zero trust, about not trusting networks anymore going forward, right? It accelerates that thought a little bit, but it's not just that. We will have to look at every vendor specifically and ascertain whether this is the right vendor for the right choice, the right value, etc. But also from a risk perspective is what is the vendor, what could break if the vendor gets infiltrated and broken. So summarizing, not stop trusting, but look at them a little bit more cautiously and look at the implication of introduction in our environments. All right.
So thanks for that. And John, let me ask you a similar question, but that I use the word trust purposely. One, because we're seeing it a lot with the term zero trust, but also because trust says a little bit more than risk. Can you give me an insight onto whether trust really changes the game, that using that terminology changes how we manage and how our estate, or is this just another way of talking about risk?
So, I mean, we've always had trust at the forefront of security. I think the world we're moving into, and I think SolarWinds is a great example, is we're moving into a more evolved approach to security, which requires us to only establish trust based on verification data. And actually, you know, that's effectively what zero trust is all about. It really shouldn't be called zero trust. It should be called mediated trust or measured trust. You know, we can't no longer trust Microsoft. But in the light of SolarWinds, maybe we need, as CISOs and on behalf of our businesses, we need to put in place some additional mechanisms, which we hadn't thought of up until now, which would verify the accuracy, the integrity of whatever it is we're receiving from the likes of Microsoft. You know, after all, I would say I'd probably be accurate speaking on behalf of quite a wide range of CISOs if I said that our teams rarely check the hash values on downloaded, updated code. We are just saying, hey, it came through Microsoft Update. Why should we check it? Or it came from, you know, Oracle or whatever it is. So trust has always been there, as I said. What moving forwards and what moving towards zero trust means is we need to be very much more proactive, very much more dynamic. We need to be establishing trust on the basis of data, and that data comes out of verification. So I could quote Ronald Reagan. I think it was Ronald Reagan who said, trust and verify, trust and verify. That's what we need to do.
So that's the first time I've been in a technical session with Ronald Reagan quoted, but I think it works. Thomas, can you give me an example, or have you been able to find instances where implicit trust was present and lurking under the surface in your organization, and how you dealt with that situation?
Implicit trust. I mean, we have a number of long-standing vendors and technologies that we all use in our systems, in our landscapes. And John here mentioned Microsoft, right? We all use Microsoft AD in some shape or way or form. Microsoft AD is one of the worst tools in my perspective from a security perspective. It is extremely chatty. It is hard to segment, right? So this implicit trust we have to AD right now, personally, I believe we need to challenge, right? And it's maybe a number of technologies that have a similar status, but we need to think about these long-standing technologies that, let's be frank, all the bad guys, they're not that too, right? They can be exploited because all the technologies, the ports, the protocols they use are very well documented by now. Everyone has experience with them, including the bad guys. So it is easy to exploit them. So I need to challenge this implicit trust to say, is it still adequate in this day and age? And it may lead to discussion about, hey, do I simply need Active Directory anymore? It's heresy in some cases, maybe, yes, true, but we still need to think about that. Is the risk of having a well-known, very exploited tool outweighed by the value it brings to the business? I don't know, it's a hard decision to make and I don't have an answer right now, but we need to ask ourselves these questions these days.
So perhaps the idea here is that trusting and verifying is not so much a new discipline, but a way of gathering more data to leverage our existing risk calculus. Is that something you would agree with, John?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think actually, yes, it's gathering more data, but it's also thinking about what data is valid. Let's take the example that Thomas gave. You know, we are used to consuming identities that are established in a Windows AD environment, but we all know there are pressures on our business to allow access into our environment using other identities. You know, if we're externalizing our network, if we're moving our workforce to through the digital transformation to use their own lifestyle tools, then at some point, for most of us, we have to consider, can we consume other parties' identities? And, you know, part of answering that question is saying, well, it's not therefore just the identity or even the authentication step that you're using to establish the trust. If you're going to allow that scenario, you know, I can sign on using my Gmail address or whatever it is, but you're also aiming to look to gather other data that you might not have first thought of, like maybe geolocation data, maybe the data about the device that I'm on. And you're basing your trust decision at the point at which you allow that connectivity to happen on a number of data points. So it behoves us as CISOs to just say, okay, you know, I'm no longer trusting that, or I'm asking for one other data point. It requires us to think very carefully about different use cases and saying, what is it that establishes trust use case? And obviously in order to help us, we are dependent on all of our technology partners to help us get to that stage and get to a stage where, of course, that more complicated world for the CISO can be managed in a coherent way.
Thanks for that, John. I love that conversation naturally migrated to where Zero Trust is really trying to move towards. And it's moving away from this implicit trust we had specifically in technology items. You know, the security world I grew up in, a security device, a firewall or a perimeter device was trusted because it was a security tool. Has that, Thomas, is that flipping on its head for you as well? And you're having to reinvestigate actually what it is you trust there in a device? Well,
Zero Trust, or the transformation to Zero Trust at least, or the journey to it, naturally will just reduce the stack of stuff we have in our data centers anyway. So 80% of what I have in the data centers, also for security tools, it will go away. All right. And if we continue down this path and thinking about BYOD or remote work or whatever, and new ways of authenticating people, then of course I will have to look at the remaining stack and say, hey, do I still need that? Or if I need to build up new capabilities, technologies, I will have to look very closely on how that fits with my vision of Zero Trust, right? How it fits with other tools I'm playing along. Do they bring really the right value? Or are they just fancy toys to play with, right? I have to think about that, yeah. But to answer your question, absolutely. I have to look at the remaining stack and see if it's still up to the task, even in a Zero Trust world, right? Or if I, again, have to let go of some long-standing technologies and vendors that have been with me for 20, 30 years, but they're simply not up to the task anymore, right? And I can't be held back by, let's say, moving in a familiar environment just because I'm used to that, right? And keep vendors and technologies around just because I'm used to them. I have to let go of a lot of things, I think, going forward. And then we can just turn this around and really reestablish that trust level, let's say, or the way we look at trust going forward, all right?
I agree completely. I mean, I had to change my own viewpoint on how trust was applied. Actually, strangely enough, when I was working for you, John, many years ago, when we were looking at a cloud security player. And at the time, I did not believe it was possible to put that trust in a security player over the internet. I didn't think it was possible. And of course, I was proved very wrong. And here I am 15 years later, singing a very, very different tune. Do you think there are better ways for vendors to establish and help us trust them?
So, better ways. That implies there's something flawed in what they're doing today. I mean, I think there are expectations that I have of the vendors who will really help us make this journey, and it's building on what Thomas was saying. So I said you need to take more data points, and you need to be able to make trust decisions actually at the point of use, if I can put it that way. So that's a somewhat more complicated world. And of course, it's highly likely that the data points that I'm talking about there are coming from a number of different vendors, that make up whatever it is, whatever the infrastructure is that is supporting that particular connectivity at that point in time. And so one of the most important criteria that I think we should be expecting from the vendors is to be able to help us to manage data that is coming both from their own offering, but also from others, to provide that combined policy-based decision on, do I trust now? Do I not trust now?
Yeah.
And that's really, that's a non-trivial thing to ask of the vendor community. And I think it, again, behoves us on the CISO side and the buy side to explain why it's in their interest to do that. And some vendors are better at seeing that, recognizing that opportunity than others. But I think that's probably one of the key benchmarks of how well we're going to be able to partner with vendors going forwards. Their readiness to do that, readiness to help us to manage that broader reach of data, which includes data that's coming from multiple platforms, if I can call it that.
And Thomas, I mean, before I leave that point, I mean, has there been an uplift in the technology means to establish this trust, or is this still something we're having to depend on process and people to do?
Well, technology evolves, obviously, and the capabilities of technology expand, right? We will still need people and processes. Technology is no magic, right? As much as I love Zscaler, it can't make coffee for me, right? So, and maybe that's a bad example, but it can't reach everywhere. So bottom line is, while I believe that the capabilities of technologies expand, and if we think about some of the more advanced models like machine learning and AI, sometimes these are buzzwords, but there is some truth there that they're expanding capabilities. It goes more around how can we leverage this properly, right? I get better data, I get better views, I get better capabilities, great. How does my process landscape is adapting to that? And it's not always easy, because sometimes people, again, are used to certain things. They can't do things anymore the way they used to, right? But sometimes there's also resistance to change because of, I don't know, maybe fear of job security even sometimes. Hey, this thing is smarter than me, right? Don't build it, don't invest it. I think both of them, as technology evolves, we will have to look at constantly at our process, people, and organizational landscape as well. Right? Just as an example, as Takeda is moving into AWS, and this has been a major announcement, we are fully aware that our organization in IT needs to change very soon. And it comes with capabilities, with training, etc., but it comes really to org charts in the end of the day, right? So even that with Amazon improving our technology capabilities vastly, it's nothing that will leave the IT landscape, the org and the process landscape untouched. No chance in hell, right?
Thank you for that, Thomas. I purposely moved us into to technology and out of the technology space and into the people and process space for a specific reason. The modern CISO, as is the the title of this session, the modern CISO has had a different a tool set than the past and has a different set of challenges in the past. And maturity is a key component of that. But maturity, of course, is leading towards something. And what I'm really keen to know is that with the best vendor risk management capability out there, with a very clear set of explicit trust model you're using with your technology vendors and your partners, there's still no finish line in sight for that modern CISO. There's no, I'm done now, I can rest, because the threat model is constantly changing. So, John, I'm going to ask you first. How do you measure success as a modern CISO?
Trust you to ask me the most difficult question a CISO needs to answer. So, yeah, success as the modern CISO. You're right, it is about measurement, but it's about measurement of something that's continually changing, which is, where are we today versus the risks that apply today in terms of our ability to manage them into this zone of comfort that that's what we're trying to get our businesses into, the risk appetite, as we say. And this has always been true, that, that's the task. It's always been difficult. I think it's never been as difficult as it is today, because we all actually struggle to represent in a numerical form, so we can paint a picture. We struggle to represent, the level of threat. What is the level of ransomware threat to a large pharmaceutical company today? How effective are the, let's say, 6 or 7 different mechanisms which realistically are key to managing down the risk of ransomware? And that's just the CISO's task in pulling together data to put one data point on some sort of representation, which then you're trying to offer up to your senior management so they get a feel for what is the current level of threat, and indeed, is that within their risk appetite? And actually, even on top of that, they probably don't really know what their risk appetite is for cyber risk, information security risk, because it's very difficult for them to get their heads around it. They might have a feel for financial risk, market risk, product risk, but very few of them have a feel for this cyber risk. So it's really, really complicated. Having said all that, all the difficulty, it is, again, about data. In this case, data on a broader front, like data for establishing trust on a micro level. This is about data on a macro level. We have to try and represent our achievements in security as a management of risk, a balance between threat and opportunity, and a placement of that risk data point somewhere in relation to an achieved level, which the business. And then, by the way, probably the most challenging piece of the conversation I've certainly had in the last 10 years, it's actually getting the business to understand the time. So it isn't a project. Security isn't a project. It's continuous, like all the other business risks. And so you might come back next month and the dots move there, and the next month it might. And so, unfortunately, they need to keep on supporting you in your journey, and that means obviously money, because it all comes down to money in the end. That's probably the best answer I can give, Mark, to a very difficult question.
Well, there's no such thing as an easy question these days, and I didn't want to make it too easy on you. But Thomas, let me ask you for a little bit. I'm going to change the question slightly. Clearly, sometimes CISOs can really succeed in the response to a particular incident. And have success in that way, but obviously you don't want to wait for a bad thing to happen to achieve success. But have you been able to have some successes in your role or in your past that are a path towards that almost job satisfaction for the future for you and your team?
Well, almost, yeah. No, the reality is, yeah, we don't sit around all day and wait for incidents to happen, right? So that would be a very bad job execution on my side, all right? And even the post incident saying, hey, I told you so not to do that, that's not really helpful, right? So what we do mostly, and what we should be doing mostly, is really guide and support the business through whatever activities they have. And in my job in particular, through the number of transformations we have. My company keeps transforming, all right? It has a couple of years ago, I said, oh my God, I can't do this anymore, right? But right now I realize that this is the new normal. Companies will transform constantly. It will never change. Zero trust is the next big thing right now. And I don't know what will happen in 5 to 10 years, right? The best thing we can do is, one, understand where the business wants to go, really support all their digital transformation as well. Because digital transformation is not a business thing, it's not an IT thing, it's something that has to go hand in hand, both sides, right? And we have to understand these new needs, the new business models, the new requirements, and to see how they fit with our sometimes a little bit outdated security principles, right? Going to the business and say, no, my God, you can't use this new fancy technology because it's going to break things, or because of that or that. It's not a good model. It's not a good answer from the business. Better answer is, I don't know how to help you right now, but I'll find out. Talk more, let me know, understand more what you're doing, right? That's the one thing. The other thing, and it goes along with it, we need to, the security people are sometimes a little bit in a bubble. I feel sometimes we're a little bit disconnected from the rest of business, certainly, sometimes even from the rest of IT. And in the past, maybe that was intentional, so that we can be the bad guys or act some sort of police, right? It's not working anymore, right? Especially with IT, of course, we need to collaborate very closely, but we also need to be way more business savvy. We need to understand way more what the business is doing, what they need, how they operate, what they want from us. At the same time, I expect the business to become more technical. If they transform, digital transformation is something they have to drive as well, as much as we do, right? They have to become way more technical than they used to right now. And we, the security people in particular, have to become way more business-like than we're used to, or even comfortable right now, all right? I hope that answers the question.
No, I like that. It is an answer, because we have to be more tightly aligned with the business, and that is a clear goal. Of course, that's not going to be measurable either. But I want to combine these two, and coming back to you, John, combine these two concepts. And if you were to implement and start actually being able to prove this zero trust philosophy being applied to your organization with technology as part of that, would that be measurable? Could you see that trend, the security transformation within a business, as a success?
So I think, yes, it's quite, if you, let me step back. As Thomas has said, a lot of our businesses are going through that digital transformation, and that digital transformation is in pursuit of empowering our staff to deliver more value for the business by blurring the distinction between old corporate technology world and the sort of technology that surrounds us in everything we do in our daily lives today. And, that's my definition anyway. And if you look at the journey we've had so far with digital transformation as CISOs, it's largely been, oh my God, if we allow bring your own device, 5 years, 10 years ago, actually, bring your own device, that breaks the model. That's impossible. We can't keep the experience, the user session secure if we allow that. What digital trust has the capability to do, right? It doesn't come out of the box, no matter how much someone tries to sell you a magical box of cornflakes called zero trust. It doesn't. But what you can do with the approach that is behind zero trust is you can finally enable that. So if you're looking for a way of demonstrating the value that a zero trust oriented approach to security gives you, it's around about exactly achieving those same digital transformation objectives. And actually, liked what Thomas was saying about getting close to the business, because actually these are the business's objectives. And where we need to be as security professionals is we need to be in there in the room saying, actually, hey, yeah, it's we who enabled the business to achieve that gain by allowing BYOD or conducting transactions on a social media platform or whatever it is, sort of radical externalization of the network, for example. And of course, you know, the proof of this is exactly what's happened during the virus experience. The mass move to home working, for many CISOs, I would suggest it's actually been a positive experience, because some of the approaches that were beginning to go towards that, you know, we can manage the security despite not owning the platform, we can manage the security despite not owning the network. Many of those things have been proven in the experience of moving to mass home working. And so we've now broken the ground, and we should grab hold of that opportunity and say, this is our opportunity to sit alongside the business guy and say, we're enabling those business benefits. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And that actually leads to the next question, which I'm going to ask you, Thomas. But I'm also going to ask the attendees today, please do ask a question in the chat or in the Q&A. Be happy to answer your questions between the panel members here. But Thomas, that was a really, I want to take a tangent off of what John just said. And that is that we are all about presenting and aligning security and ensuring that there are business objectives that are met through our drive and security. But I'm going to pivot that against zero trust. And zero trust, a lot of the business is thinking, well, it's the next security buzzword, or it's, you know, why do I need it? Tell me why zero trust should be important to me. How do you present that architectural / philosophical challenge to the business and say, no, this does align with your business needs? How do you sell that?
Well, what is the core IT imperative? That's what I keep thinking about lately. What is the reason IT exists, right? What is the business paying us for? They don't pay us for security. They don't pay us for servers or data centers or anything. They pay us for access to data and applications. That's all they care about. They don't care about anything else. They want the data on their fingertips to do decisions making or make money or share with partners or whatever they want. What I always start with when I want to lead into zero trust discussion is the one thing you want from us, applications and data access on your fingertips. I can give you that in a much, much easier, simpler, faster way than you're doing right now. You will be able to access applications wherever you are in the world, with whatever device you like, as long as you can prove that you are who you are and you're entitled to access that information. Everything else, leave that to me. I will make that work with pure magic. And we all know that this is not real magic. There's hard technology behind that. There are servers and all that stuff, but the business doesn't care about that. And I don't want the business to care about that, right? That's my job to care about. I need to understand where the business wants the data, how they want to share it, with whom, what the access model needs to be, yada, all these things. And I will build the model around that in the background, right? It is not always as easy as that, because sometimes we have even in the business resistance, let's say, to new models. And yes, there's a lot of investment requirement. And yes, we are putting a lot of accountability back to the business, because if I need to build a proper zero trust model with access to applications and data based on identities and entitlements, I need to go to the business and ask them, who do you want to be able to access this application? And sometimes they don't like the question, because right now, or in the old days, all they needed to do is connect the device to VPN and they could connect to whatever they like, right? They had access to the network with all the data centers and applications. I don't want that anymore. I need you, business, to tell me who needs to access what, and I will make that happen. But the accountability to define that, the access, it's up to the business. So it's not always easy, but it's largely offset by the simplicity, the easy access, the quick responses, whatever we can give with the zero trust access, right? So it is a little bit hard discussion in the beginning, but once they see the benefits and the advantages of the model, it becomes much easier, right?
Thank you for that, Thomas. John, again, pivoting off of what Thomas has just said, and there's a really interesting point there. Pulling away the buzzword part of zero trust, is it possible then that the zero trust model is the holy grail that security has been looking for all this time, and being a business enabler? And I mean that with a little bit, a strong dose of not sarcasm, but a little bit of humor in there. But I mean, could it be that this is what we've been looking for?
Yeah, well, actually, I liked Thomas's reference to us as doing magic. I've always wanted to do that. My magic tricks are terrible, by the way. Yeah, look, I think it's, I would tone down the language a little bit. I would say it isn't finally, this is our opportunity to be business enablers. I think I put it slightly differently. It's a bit like what I just said. It's our opportunity to get very, very close to the real business value that comes out of security. Being very, bringing that business value into focus for the business guys. Because here now we're saying you can work at the forefront of the way we live today, the digital way of life, and still be in control of your risks. And that's a really powerful message. It's putting us on the front foot, whereas, we have, and this is really answering your question. We've always been the disabler. We've always been the naysayers, the no men. And the opportunity here is for us to be the yes men, because we are realizing that there is a different model that is less static, more dynamic. It's still about trust, but it's about dynamically managing trust. I don't know if I've answered your question, but
well, yeah. I think you definitely shot down my holy grail, which I'm quite comfortable with because it was thrown up as a thought bubble. So let me go back, I guess, down to starting at the beginning of this conversation, and have some kind of brass tacks advice. Thomas, can you give us two items that to walk away with regarding this whole trusting, what we're doing with vendor impact, the vendor breaches, etc. Just two items to maybe go back to their day jobs with.
Well, again, look at which vendors you need, right, and what provides you the best value, obviously. But also look at don't implicitly trust them anymore, right? But look at the implications of what could happen if something goes wrong. Like John said, trust and verify. It's actually quite cool, right? I will use that, John, later on. And the other piece is prepare to let go of some long-standing, well-known brands and technologies in your environment. Nothing should be untouchable anymore. Nothing should be granted as given just because it has been around for 20 years. Look at everything from a security lens and let's say failed trust lens, like what happens if it goes wrong and do I still need this thing?
Thank you for that, Thomas. I love that second one. Momentum and inertia are just two ways of looking at the same thing. And with a vendor, it can be either. So John, your two bits of advice to take back today.
So when talking to vendors, don't buy zero trust. Buy solutions to use cases which you understand require a zero trust model or some type of zero trust enabling functionality. But the vendors will say, I sell zero trust. Any vendor worth their salt will say they're selling zero trust, and they'll be right to varying degrees. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that, but don't, as a CISO, go in the room thinking I'm going to now buy a zero trust solution. Say, go in the room knowing what is the unsolved business problem or the unmet business need that I'm trying to fulfill, and I need a zero trust like solution, and buy that. The second thing would be internally, the conversation needs to be actually quite similar. It's not here, Mr. Businessman, I'm going to now talk to you about zero trust, even if they have read about it in the FT or whatever they read. Again, try and make it about here's something that you want to do better business, and here's how I'm going to allow you to do it without losing sleep at night about being hacked or losing the data or whatever it is.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, Thomas. That was a fantastic chat we've had. I'd love to introduce Howie Zhu, who is going to talk to us about AI/ML and innovation in the security space, particularly for the modern CISO. Thank you very much, John and Thomas.